Emma Hart pressed both palms against the warm wooden counter and closed her eyes for just a second. The comforting scent of fresh sourdough, cinnamon, and melted butter filled the tiny bakery. But today, even that familiar aroma couldn't drown out the cold knot tightening in her chest. The handwritten notice from the bank lay folded beside the old cash register. Final payment due, tomorrow. If she failed to pay, Hart's Bakery, the little shop her late mother had built with flour-covered hands and impossible dreams, would officially belong to someone else. Outside, autumn rain painted silver streaks across the front window. Cars splashed through puddles without slowing, and only a handful of pedestrians wandered along Maple Street, umbrellas bowed against the wind. Emma forced herself to smile anyway. The bell above the door chimed. A young couple stepped inside, looked around, whispered to each other, then noticed Emma behind the counter. The woman leaned toward her boyfriend. "She owns this place?" Emma heard every word. The boyfriend shrugged. "I thought bakers were supposed to look healthier." Neither of them bought anything. The bell rang again as they left. Emma lowered her eyes for a moment before inhaling slowly. "It's okay," she whispered to herself. "Not everyone comes for the bread." She wiped the spotless counter again, though it didn't need cleaning. The silence returned. It hadn't always been this way. Years ago, every morning had begun with laughter. Parents lined up with sleepy children. Construction workers argued over which cinnamon rolls were best. College students fought for the last chocolate croissant before class. Now the coffee machine hummed louder than the customers. Emma glanced toward the kitchen, where the ancient brick oven radiated its final warmth of the day. She had enough flour left for only one more batch tomorrow morning. After that, nothing. Her supplier had refused another extension. The landlord had already stopped pretending everything would work out. Even the electricity company had sent warnings. Still, every loaf she baked carried the same care her mother had taught her. "People remember how food makes them feel," her mother used to say. Not how expensive the ingredients were. Emma smiled faintly at the memory. The bell rang once more. She looked up, expecting another customer. Instead, an elderly man stepped inside. He wore a weathered gray coat that had clearly seen too many winters. His beard was neatly trimmed, despite his worn appearance, and rain dripped quietly from the brim of his faded cap. He looked exhausted, not merely tired, hungry, the kind of hunger that hollowed out a person's eyes. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The old man slowly studied the display shelves. There wasn't much left. One apple pie, a few pastries, 3 rolls, and one beautiful golden sourdough loaf cooling on a wooden rack. Emma recognized him. She had seen him sitting alone in the small park 2 streets away more than once during the past month. Always reading, always feeding birds before feeding himself. He reached into his pocket. His fingers searched carefully. Coins. Only a few. He counted them once. Then again. His shoulders sank almost invisibly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. His voice carried surprising dignity. "I thought I had enough." Emma looked at the coins, then at the bread, then back at the man. She smiled. "The loaf is yours." His eyebrows lifted. "I can't afford it." "I know. I don't accept charity." Emma shook her head gently. "Neither do I." He frowned. "Then why?" She untied her apron, wrapped the warm loaf in brown paper, and placed it in front of him. "Because hungry people shouldn't have to negotiate." The old man stared at her for a long moment. "You'll lose money." Emma laughed softly. "I think that ship sailed a while ago." For the first time, the corners of his mouth moved. Barely. Almost a smile. Instead of reaching for the bread immediately, he looked around the bakery. Really looked. His eyes lingered on the patched ceiling, the cracked mixer that rattled every few minutes, the faded family photographs hanging near the oven, the stack of overdue bills tucked beneath the register. He noticed everything. "You built this place?" he asked. "My parents did." And now? Now I'm trying not to lose it. You work alone? Emma nodded. My mother passed away 4 years ago. And your father? He was gone long before that. The old man lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. She offered the same tired smile she'd practiced for years. It's life. Another silence settled between them. Comfortable this time. The rain tapped softly against the windows. The oven clicked as it cooled. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Finally, the old man accepted the loaf with both hands, as though it were something priceless. It smells wonderful, Emma chuckled. That's because it's still warm. He inhaled deeply. Then, unexpectedly, he tore off the smallest piece and took a bite. He closed his eyes. Not dramatically, simply, gratefully. I haven't tasted bread like this in decades. Emma felt her throat tighten. My mother invented the recipe. She must have been remarkable. She was. The old man nodded slowly. I can tell. He reached into his coat pocket once again. Emma quickly raised a hand. No. It's only fair. No. Please. She shook her head once more. If you want to repay me. He waited. Come back someday when you're doing better. Something flickered across his face. Not pity. Respect. A deep, quiet respect. I'll remember that. He turned toward the door. Halfway there, he stopped. Without looking back, he asked, Miss Emma. Emma. He repeated her name carefully, committing it to memory. Do people often mistake kindness for weakness? Emma thought about every cruel joke, every customer who laughed after she turned away, every former classmate who said no one would ever love someone who looked like her, every unpaid bill, every lonely birthday. Then she smiled anyway. They can mistake it. They're usually wrong. The old man gave a slow nod, then disappeared into the rain. The bell above the door rang one final time. Emma watched through the fogged glass as he walked away carrying the loaf beneath his coat like something precious. Only when he vanished around the corner did she lock the bakery door. The smile faded. She leaned against it, closed her eyes, and let out a trembling breath. The cash register contained barely enough money to buy groceries. She counted it twice. It didn't change. The bank notice still waited on the counter. Tomorrow morning. That was the deadline. She switched off every light except the one above the oven. The bakery instantly felt smaller, quieter, almost as if it already belonged to someone else. Before leaving, Emma placed one hand on the old brick oven. I tried, Mom. Her voice cracked. I really tried. No answer came. Only silence. She turned the key and stepped into the rainy evening, unaware that a black luxury sedan had been parked across the street for nearly 20 minutes. Inside the car, a younger man in an immaculate suit lowered a pair of binoculars. He never took his eyes off Emma. Into a discreet earpiece, he spoke only 5 words. She's exactly as he said. The driver started the engine. The sedan disappeared without headlights. The next morning, Emma arrived before sunrise, expecting another ordinary battle against empty shelves, unpaid debts, and fading hope. Instead, as she unlocked the bakery door, a deep rumble echoed through the quiet street. One after another, black SUVs rolled around the corner. Not one, not 2, 6. They moved with slow, deliberate precision before stopping directly in front of Hart's Bakery. Engines idled. The entire neighborhood fell silent. Curtains twitched. Shop owners stepped outside. Emma stood frozen, her keys slipping from her fingers onto the sidewalk. Then the first SUV door opened. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped out. Another followed. Then another. Each one broad-shouldered, expressionless, an earpiece tucked behind one ear. And beneath the opening of every tailored jacket, Emma caught the unmistakable glimpse of a holstered handgun. Her heartbeat stopped for a fraction of a second. She suddenly realized every single man walking toward her bakery was armed. The first man reached the bakery door without hurrying. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't knock. He simply opened the door as though he had done it 1,000 times before. The tiny brass bell chimed softly. Emma instinctively stepped backward. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Outside, Maple Street had transformed into an audience. The florist across the road abandoned a bouquet halfway through wrapping it. A delivery driver stopped unloading boxes. 2 elderly women whispered behind their shopping bags, their eyes fixed on the line of black SUVs stretching almost the entire length of the curb. Nobody spoke loudly. Nobody dared. The second man entered. Then the third. Each wore an impeccably tailored black suit, polished shoes untouched by the morning rain, and the same unreadable expression. Not one of them looked around with curiosity. They examined the bakery with quiet discipline. One man noticed a chair that leaned slightly against the wall. Without a word, he straightened it. Another walked to the front window and gently turned the sign from closed to open. A third picked up the ring of keys Emma had dropped outside moments earlier. He stepped toward her and held them out with both hands. "Miss." Emma hesitated. He wasn't threatening her. His voice was respectful, almost formal. She slowly accepted the keys. "Thank you." The man gave a single nod before returning to his place. No one else spoke. The silence became stranger with every passing second. Emma glanced toward the street. More suited men had remained outside, quietly forming an invisible perimeter around the bakery, not blocking pedestrians, not intimidating anyone deliberately, simply watching. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, are those bodyguards?" His mother hurried him away without answering. Emma swallowed. "What is this about?" No one replied. Instead, one of the men removed a clean white handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wiped a few raindrops from the wooden chair closest to the counter. When he finished, he stepped back, as though preparing a seat for someone important. Very important. Minutes crawled by. The old oven hummed softly in the kitchen. Fresh cinnamon rolls continued baking, filling the room with their warm aroma. One suited man inhaled almost imperceptibly. Another's eyes drifted toward the display case filled with pastries. None of them reached for anything. They simply waited. Emma had never experienced silence that felt so loud. Finally, the rumble of another engine echoed outside. Different. Lower. Heavier. Everyone inside the bakery straightened. Every suited man turned toward the entrance simultaneously. The street fell completely still. A long black sedan stopped behind the SUVs. Its rear door opened. A polished leather shoe touched the pavement. Then another. The man who stepped out wasn't the largest among them. He didn't need to be. Everything about him carried effortless authority. Charcoal overcoat, black gloves, dark hair brushed neatly back. A faint scar traced the edge of his jaw, disappearing beneath his collar. He walked without wasting a single movement. No hurried steps. No unnecessary gestures. The bodyguards instinctively created a path before he reached the bakery door. Nobody had ordered them. They simply knew. Emma watched him enter. The bell chimed once. He removed one black leather glove. His gray eyes swept across the room. Not searching, confirming. They landed on Emma, stayed there, for several quiet seconds. He neither smiled nor frowned. His face revealed almost nothing. Yet Emma felt strangely unable to look away. The man took 3 slow steps toward the counter. Every other person in the bakery remained perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, deep, almost gentle. "Where is the woman?" A brief pause. "Who fed my father?" Emma blinked. What?" His gaze never left hers. "The woman who gave an old man fresh bread yesterday." Realization washed across her face. "The elderly gentleman?" "Yes." Emma frowned. "He said he couldn't afford a loaf." "He couldn't. I only wanted him to eat." The man's eyes softened. "Barely. So it was you." Emma looked past him toward the line of black SUVs, then back again. "I'm sorry." She hesitated. "I don't understand." The man reached into his coat pocket. Emma instinctively stiffened. Instead of a weapon, he withdrew a neatly folded photograph. He placed it on the counter. It showed the old man. Only, not in worn clothes. He wore an elegant tailored suit, standing beside this very man, both smiling. The background appeared to be a massive estate. Emma stared at the picture. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible." The man answered quietly. "No, it isn't. My name is Luca Moretti." The name meant nothing to Emma, but outside, someone walking past the bakery suddenly froze. A passing businessman overheard the name. The color drained from his face. Without another glance, he hurried across the street. Inside, Emma simply shook her head. "I'm afraid I still don't understand." Luca studied her carefully. "You truly don't know who he is." It wasn't a question. No, he preferred it that way. Emma looked again at the photograph. The clothes, the beard was real. The hunger, also real. She frowned. "But why would someone like him?" Luca interrupted quietly. "He disappeared because he wanted to know something." "What?" "Whether kindness still existed." Emma stared at him. "I don't." "He visited restaurants." She listened. "Hotels." Another pause. "Private clubs." His voice remained emotionless. "No one offered him food." Emma lowered her eyes. "He came here yesterday." "Yes. And you gave away your final fresh loaf." "I didn't know it was my last loaf." Luca glanced briefly toward the nearly empty shelves. "You did." Emma didn't answer. Because he was right. She had known. She simply hadn't cared. Footsteps approached from outside. Another suited man entered. This one considerably older than the others. He leaned toward Luca and whispered something too quietly for Emma to hear. Luca nodded once. The older man disappeared again. Emma finally gathered enough courage to ask the question burning inside her. "So," she swallowed, "who exactly is your father?" Luca remained silent. Instead, the bakery bell rang once again. Every bodyguard turned toward the entrance. Emma followed their gaze. The elderly man from yesterday stepped inside. Except, he no longer wore the worn gray coat. Instead, he was dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit. His silver hair had been combed neatly. A polished cane rested lightly in one hand. The same warm eyes, the same gentle smile. But now he carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. Not feared, simply respected. Deeply. Emma's mouth slowly fell open. "You," the old man smiled. "Good morning, Emma." "You." She couldn't finish the sentence. He chuckled softly. "The bread was excellent." You thought I was homeless." You weren't wrong." He stepped closer. "I was hungry." Emma looked between father and son. Nothing made sense anymore. Victor extended one hand. She accepted it automatically. His grip was warm, steady. "You treated me with dignity when you believed I had nothing." Emma felt tears threatening to rise. "I only gave you bread." Victor shook his head gently. "No, you gave me something far more difficult to find." He smiled. "You gave me kindness without asking who I was." The bakery fell silent once more. Outside, more neighbors had gathered. Phones appeared. People whispered. Some began recording through the windows. Emma hardly noticed. She was too busy staring at the elderly man she had pitied less than 24 hours earlier. Victor looked around the little bakery one more time. His eyes rested on the cracked oven, the faded photographs, the worn wooden floor. Then he turned toward his son. Only 4 quiet words left his lips. "She's exactly as I hoped." Luca gave one almost imperceptible nod. Then he reached inside his coat again. This time, he removed a slim black leather checkbook. Emma's confused expression deepened. Luca uncapped an elegant fountain pen. Without saying a word, he began writing a number with more zeros than Emma had ever seen in her life. Luca finished writing without the slightest hesitation. The scratch of his fountain pen against the paper seemed unnaturally loud inside the silent bakery. Emma watched him tear the check free. He laid it gently on the wooden counter and slid it toward her. She looked down. For a brief second, her mind refused to process the number. Then her breath caught. It wasn't enough to save Hart's Bakery. It was enough to buy the entire block. Emma looked up so quickly the chair behind her scraped across the floor. "There has to be a mistake." "There isn't," Luca replied. "I can't accept this." Victor smiled knowingly, as if he had expected those exact words. "It isn't charity." Emma looked from father to son. "It certainly looks like it." "It is gratitude," Victor corrected softly. She shook her head. "I gave you 1 loaf of bread." Victor rested both hands on the top of his cane. "No. You gave an old man his dignity." Emma stared at the check again. Her hands remained at her sides. She didn't even touch it. "I wasn't trying to earn anything." "I know. Then why would you offer me this?" Victor's expression grew thoughtful. "Because some debts cannot be measured by money." Emma let out a nervous laugh. "Then don't try to repay it with money." The room became perfectly still. Several bodyguards exchanged subtle glances. One of them blinked twice, almost as though he had misheard. Nobody refused Luca Moretti. Nobody. Yet the woman standing behind the cracked wooden counter had just done exactly that. Luca's gray eyes remained fixed on Emma. There was no anger in them. Only quiet curiosity. "You are refusing?" Emma nodded. "Yes. You've seen the amount." "That doesn't change my answer." Victor tilted his head. "Why?" Emma finally reached for the check. For one brief moment, Luca thought she had reconsidered. Instead, she folded it once, then again, and carefully placed it back into Luca's hand. "I wasn't selling bread." Her voice was calm, steady. "If I take this, yesterday becomes a transaction." She smiled sadly. "I don't want it to become one." Victor closed his eyes. A faint chuckle escaped him. When he opened them again, they shimmered with unmistakable emotion. "I had forgotten," he murmured, "that people like you still exist." Emma shrugged awkwardly. "I just did what my mother would have done." Victor looked toward one of the framed photographs hanging beside the oven. The picture showed a younger Emma standing beside a cheerful woman covered in flour, both laughing while holding an oversized loaf of bread. "She looks kind." She was. "And stubborn?" Emma laughed despite herself. "The most stubborn person I've ever known." Victor nodded. "It shows." Luca silently observed the exchange. He had spent his entire adult life watching people negotiate. Everything had a price. Power, loyalty, silence, fear, even affection. Yet the woman before him had rejected enough money to erase every problem in her life, without pausing for more than a heartbeat. It unsettled him. In a way, violence never had. Victor slowly walked through the bakery. His fingertips brushed across the worn wooden shelves. He paused beside the ancient brick oven. "This oven is older than you." Emma smiled. "My grandfather built it. It still works. Most days." Victor looked closely at the cracked bricks. "They've been repaired many times." "So have I." The answer escaped Emma before she realized she'd said it aloud. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Victor turned toward her. "I believe that." Luca noticed something then. Emma's apron had been stitched by hand in 3 different places. The soles of her shoes were beginning to separate. The sleeves of her sweater had been carefully mended. She wasn't poor because she was careless. She was poor because every dollar she had earned had gone back into keeping this bakery alive. A young bodyguard quietly approached Luca. "Sir." Luca turned slightly. "The bank manager has arrived." Emma frowned. "The bank?" She looked through the window. Across the street, a silver sedan had just parked. A nervous-looking man in a navy business suit hurried toward the bakery, carrying a leather briefcase. The moment he stepped inside, he froze. His eyes landed on Luca. His face turned pale. "Mr. Moretti." Luca gave the slightest nod. The banker immediately lowered his gaze. "Everything is prepared." Emma looked between them. "What is happening?" The banker opened his briefcase and removed several folders. He carefully placed them on the counter. "Miss Hart," his voice trembled slightly. "Your mortgage." Emma's heart sank. She knew what came next. Foreclosure, eviction, the end. Instead, the banker cleared his throat. "Has been completely forgiven." Emma blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The loan no longer exists." "What?" "The property is debt-free." She looked at Luca, then Victor, then back at the banker. "No." The banker looked confused. "No, I didn't authorize that." Victor smiled gently. "You don't have to." Emma shook her head more firmly. "Yes, I do." The banker looked helplessly toward Luca. Luca said nothing. He simply waited. Emma inhaled slowly. "I appreciate what you're trying to do." She pushed the documents back across the counter. "But I can't let someone else buy my life for me." The banker looked as though he wished the floor would swallow him. He had never witnessed anyone declining freedom from debt. Victor's smile widened. "You truly are your mother's daughter." Emma looked surprised. "You never met her?" "No. But I think I know the kind of woman she was." Emma lowered her eyes. "She believed people should stand on their own feet." Victor nodded. "Even when those feet are tired. Especially then." Luca finally spoke. "What if help is freely given?" Emma met his gaze. "Then let me earn it." The answer lingered between them. Luca had built an empire on obligation. Every favor created another debt. Every debt created another chain. Emma wanted neither. She wanted dignity. He understood that. Perhaps better than she realized. Victor slowly picked up the loan documents. Without tearing them, without signing them, he simply handed them back to the banker. "Leave them." The banker nodded immediately. "Of course." He hurried from the bakery, visibly relieved to escape. Emma looked at Victor. "I hope I didn't offend you." "My dear." Victor smiled warmly. "You honored me." She frowned. "I refused everything." "Exactly." He glanced toward Luca. "Do you know how many people become generous after learning my name?" Emma remained silent. Victor answered his own question. "Almost everyone." A faint sadness entered his voice. "But yesterday," he looked directly into her eyes, "you believed I was a forgotten old man, and still offered me your last loaf." Outside, unnoticed by everyone inside the bakery, a man wearing a dark baseball cap stood across the street, beside a newspaper vending box. His phone rested discreetly in one hand. The camera zoomed in. Click. Emma talking to Luca. Click. Victor smiling. Click. The photographs captured every angle. The man lowered the phone. A satisfied grin spread across his face. He typed a short message. "Target confirmed." Within seconds, a reply appeared. "Keep watching her. Don't lose sight of the baker." The man slipped the phone into his pocket and disappeared into the morning crowd. Inside the bakery, Victor prepared to leave. Before stepping outside, he paused beside Emma. "If I cannot repay your kindness," he reached into his jacket. Emma sighed softly. "I already said." Victor chuckled. "No money." He withdrew a small cream-colored card instead. "Only a name, a phone number, nothing else. If you ever truly need help." He placed it gently on the counter. "Call." Emma hesitated, then accepted the card. "Thank you." Victor nodded once. Luca walked toward the door without another word. Just before crossing the threshold, he stopped. For the first time since arriving, he looked back. His eyes met Emma's. There was no smile, no dramatic speech, only 4 quiet words. "Don't stop baking." Then he stepped outside. The convoy slowly pulled away from Hart's bakery. Within minutes, Maple Street returned to its ordinary rhythm. But nothing about Emma's life was ordinary anymore. She stood alone behind the counter, still holding Victor's card. She had no idea that somewhere beyond the crowds, someone had already begun hunting the woman who had unknowingly become important to the most powerful family in the city. The bakery was quiet again. Too quiet. By noon, the black SUVs had vanished. The curious neighbors had returned to work, and the whispers on Maple Street had faded into uneasy speculation. Emma tried to convince herself the morning had been nothing more than a strange dream. She dusted flour across the wooden work table, mixed dough, folded butter into croissant layers, measured cinnamon with the same careful rhythm her mother had taught her years ago. Work had always been her refuge. If her hands stayed busy, her mind usually followed. Usually. She kept seeing Victor's smile, Luca's calm gray eyes, the check she had refused. Most of all, she kept replaying those 4 words. "Don't stop baking." She wasn't sure why they lingered in her thoughts. Perhaps because Luca had spoken them without pity, without trying to rescue her. Almost like an order, number, a promise. The bell above the door jingled. Emma looked up with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon." A young woman entered, glanced at the pastry display, then suddenly stiffened. "You?" Emma blinked. "Can I help you?" The woman hurriedly stepped backward. Never mind." She turned and almost ran out of the bakery. Emma stared after her, confused. Less than 5 minutes later, the same thing happened again. A middle-aged man walked inside, recognized Emma, looked strangely nervous, then left without buying anything. By 3 o'clock, 4 more customers had done exactly the same. None of them explained why. Emma finally sighed. "Okay," she muttered. "Now this is getting weird." Her phone vibrated on the counter. It was her flour supplier. She answered immediately. "Hi, Mr. Collins." There was an awkward silence. "I'm sorry, Emma." Her smile slowly faded. "What happened?" "I won't be able to deliver your order tomorrow. You already confirmed it." "I know." "Did something happen to the truck?" "No." "The warehouse?" "No." Emma frowned. "Then why?" The older man sounded genuinely uncomfortable. "I've accepted another contract." "For all your flour?" "Yes. But we've worked together for 8 years." Another silence. Finally, he whispered, "I was advised not to do business with you anymore." Emma's stomach tightened. "Advised? I'm sorry." The line went dead. Emma slowly lowered the phone. She immediately called her dairy supplier. No answer. The coffee distributor. Voicemail. The local egg farm. Busy. By evening, every supplier she depended on had canceled future deliveries. None of them gave a real explanation. Each sounded frightened. Not angry. Afraid. Emma leaned against the counter. What is happening? Outside, rain clouds gathered once again, swallowing the last traces of afternoon sunlight. Across the street, hidden inside a parked sedan, the man in the baseball cap watched the bakery through tinted windows. He lifted a phone. "Phase 1 is complete," a distorted voice answered. "Good. She'll run out of ingredients within 48 hours. And? She still doesn't know why." A brief pause. Then the voice replied, "Excellent." The call ended. The man smiled. That evening, Emma locked the bakery later than usual. She carried 2 small trash bags toward the alley behind the building. The streetlights flickered weakly above her. The alley was empty. Or so she thought. As she turned back toward the bakery, she heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Behind her. Emma stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. She looked over her shoulder. No one. Only darkness. She laughed nervously. "You're imagining things." She started walking again. The footsteps returned. Closer this time. Her heartbeat quickened. She spun around. Nothing. The alley remained empty, except for overflowing dumpsters and rainwater glistening beneath the lights. Hello. No answer. A stray cat darted between two trash bins, startling her. Emma let out a shaky laugh. Very funny. She hurried back inside and locked the door. Without realizing it, a man stood silently on the rooftop across the alley, watching. The next morning, Hart's Bakery opened 30 minutes late. Not because Emma overslept, because someone had glued the front door lock shut. She spent nearly an hour scraping hardened adhesive from the keyhole. Several regular customers eventually gave up and walked away. When she finally managed to open the shop, only 3 people came inside all morning. By lunchtime, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophie, her oldest friend. Emma, you sound upset. I just searched your bakery online. So? A long pause. There are hundreds of new reviews. Emma frowned. What reviews? I think you should look. Emma opened the business page on her laptop. Her smile disappeared instantly. Saya, which meinades vorish paid, had become Saya. 1-star review after 1-star review flooded the screen. Found insects in my bread. The owner screamed at customers. Filthy kitchen. Worst bakery in town. Never coming back. Emma's hands trembled. I've never even seen these people. She clicked on several profiles. Most had no photos, no history. Created only days earlier. Fake. Every single one. Tears welled in her eyes. Not because strangers hated her, because they had never even met her. The bakery door opened. An elderly regular named Mrs. Evelyn entered carrying her usual knitted shopping bag. Emma quickly wiped her eyes. Morning. Mrs. Evelyn smiled warmly. I don't care what those people write. Emma blinked. You saw them? My grandson showed me. The older woman reached across the counter and gently squeezed Emma's hand. I've bought bread here for 16 years. She smiled. You can't fake that. Emma's eyes filled again. Thank you. Mrs. Evelyn bought 2 loaves instead of 1, then quietly slipped an extra $20 bill onto the counter. Emma immediately noticed. You gave me too much. I know. I can't take it. Mrs. Evelyn winked. Then pretend I tipped your mother. Before Emma could answer, the elderly woman walked out smiling. Emma stood motionless for several seconds. Sometimes, kindness arrived exactly when it was needed. Several miles away, inside a quiet office overlooking the city skyline, Luca Moretti stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window. One of his men entered. The bakery. Luca didn't turn around. What about it? The supplier contracts were canceled. Silence. The fake reviews? Over 400. The door was sabotaged. Luca slowly looked over his shoulder. His expression remained unreadable. Who ordered it? We're still tracing it. Luca's gaze hardened almost imperceptibly. They moved quickly. Yes, boss. Another pause. They've also been following Miss Hart. Luca said nothing. He simply extended one hand. His lieutenant immediately placed a tablet into it. The screen displayed surveillance photographs. Emma carrying flour. Emma locking the bakery. Emma speaking with customers. Dozens of pictures, taken from different angles, different days. Someone had been watching her long before Victor ever entered the bakery. Luca studied the images in silence. Then he noticed something. One photograph had captured the reflection of the photographer inside a store window. Only part of a face. A dark baseball cap. A thin scar across the left eyebrow. Luca recognized him immediately. Not the name. The employer. He handed the tablet back. I know whose work this is. His lieutenant's expression darkened. The Romano Syndicate? Luca gave a slight shake of his head. No. The De Luca family. The room became noticeably colder. His lieutenant exhaled slowly. If they're targeting the baker, they're not interested in her. Luca interrupted quietly. They're interested in me. That same evening, Emma closed the bakery early. She had barely enough ingredients left for one more day. She switched off the lights and stood alone in the darkness. The old brick oven still radiated gentle warmth. She rested one hand against it. "I don't know what's happening, Mom." Her voice cracked. "But I'm scared." Outside, a pair of headlights briefly illuminated the front windows before continuing down the street. Emma never noticed. Inside that passing vehicle, a man lifted a camera fitted with a long lens. Click. One final photograph. This time, it wasn't of the bakery. It was of Emma, standing alone in the dark. The image was immediately transmitted to a secure phone. A message appeared beneath it. "She's isolated now." The reply came almost instantly. "Good. Tomorrow, we make her lose everything." The following morning began with smoke. Not flames. Not yet. Just the bitter smell of something burning somewhere nearby. Emma unlocked the bakery and instinctively looked up and down Maple Street. Everything appeared normal. The florist was arranging sunflowers. The cafe across the road had already formed its usual line. A city bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Life moved as though nothing had changed. Yet the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest the previous night refused to leave. She stepped inside. The silence greeted her before the scent of fresh bread could. The refrigerator wasn't humming. The display lights were off. The coffee machine was dark. Emma frowned. She flipped the light switch. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. She walked into the kitchen. The old oven, usually warm by this hour, sat cold and lifeless. "No!" She hurried outside. Half the block had electricity. The bakery didn't. She immediately called the utility company. After navigating 3 automated menus, a tired customer service representative finally answered. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart. There seems to be an issue with your account." "My account? It shows your service has been disconnected." "It can't have been. I paid last week." The woman typed for several seconds, then stopped. "That's strange." "What?" "It says someone requested immediate commercial termination yesterday afternoon." Emma's blood ran cold. "I never requested that. I can see that now. Can you reconnect it? I'm afraid the earliest available technician is tomorrow evening." "Tomorrow?" "I'm very sorry." The call ended. Emma stared at the silent phone. Tomorrow evening. Without electricity, there would be no bread, no pastries, no business. She leaned against the counter and laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because she could feel herself standing at the edge of something she couldn't yet see. The bell above the door jingled. Emma looked up hopefully. Instead of a customer, Sophie hurried inside. Her cheeks were flushed from running. "I came as soon as I saw." Emma forced a smile. "You've always had terrible timing." Sophie ignored the joke. "What happened?" "I honestly don't know anymore." Emma explained everything. The canceled suppliers, the fake reviews, the power, the footsteps, the glued lock. Sophie listened without interrupting. When Emma finished, the silence stretched between them. Finally, Sophie asked the question Emma had been avoiding herself. "Do you think this has anything to do with those men?" Emma looked toward the window. "I don't know. They show up. Then your life starts falling apart. It could be coincidence." Sophie raised an eyebrow. Emma sighed. "Okay, it probably isn't." Across town, Luca Moretti sat alone at the head of a long conference table. 8 captains of the Moretti syndicate waited in absolute silence. No one spoke before Luca. No one checked a phone. No one even shifted in their chair. One of his lieutenants entered carrying a thick folder. "We've confirmed everything." He placed photographs across the polished table. Canceled contracts, utility records, security footage, bank transactions, every incident surrounding Emma's bakery. Luca looked through them one by one, methodically, patiently. Finally, he reached the last photograph, a close-up of the man wearing the baseball cap. The scar over his eyebrow was unmistakable. Luca rested one finger on the image. Nicholas Kane, Several men around the table exchanged grim looks. One captain muttered, "I thought he disappeared." "He did," Luca replied calmly. "He disappeared into the DeLuca family." The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what that meant. Nicholas Kane wasn't a freelance spy. He belonged to the Moretti family's oldest enemy. Another lieutenant spoke carefully. "Boss?" Luca looked up. "We also identified the person giving Kane his orders." He slid one final photograph across the table. A man in an expensive charcoal suit. Perfect smile. Expensive watch. Perfectly styled hair. Luca recognized him immediately. Without emotion. Without surprise. Daniel Mercer. One captain frowned. "The businessman? He owns restaurants and investment firms." Another lieutenant shook his head. "Only on paper." The folder opened. Inside were dozens of classified reports. Money laundering, extortion, illegal gambling, arms trafficking. Daniel Mercer had spent years hiding behind legitimate businesses, and now he was working directly with the DeLuca family. Luca's eyes lingered on Daniel's photograph. Then something caught his attention. Another picture lay beneath it. Emma, standing beside the same man several years earlier. Both smiling. Younger. Happier. Luca looked toward his intelligence chief. They knew each other. They were engaged. The words hung heavily in the room. The chief continued. "Wedding canceled 4 years ago. Reason? He left her." Luca waited. The chief's voice hardened. Publicly, he repeatedly mocked her appearance, humiliated her, told friends she embarrassed him. Silence. He also convinced several investors to stop supporting the bakery after Emma inherited it. Another page turned. Most of her financial problems began shortly afterward. Luca closed the folder, very carefully. His expression never changed. Only those who had served him for years noticed the difference. His right hand had slowly formed a fist. Back at the bakery, Emma and Sophie were cleaning the empty display shelves. There wasn't much left to organize. Without electricity, almost everything would spoil before morning. Sophie stopped polishing a tray. "Why didn't you ever tell me how bad things were with Daniel?" Emma smiled faintly. "Because talking about him always made him feel important. You loved him." "I thought I did." "What happened?" Emma hesitated, then quietly answered. "He loved the version of me he thought he could change." Sophie remained silent. Emma continued. "He bought me smaller dresses. He'd laugh if I wanted dessert. He introduced me as—" Her voice caught. "The pretty face with too much cake." Sophie closed her eyes. "He actually said that?" Emma nodded. "More than once. He promised we'd build the bakery together." Emma looked around the empty shop. "Instead, he convinced everyone I wasn't capable of running it." She smiled sadly. "I kept believing if I worked harder, he'd finally be proud of me." Sophie reached over and embraced her tightly. "You deserved so much better." Emma didn't answer. Some wounds had long ago stopped bleeding. That didn't mean they had healed. Across the city, Daniel Mercer stood inside a luxurious penthouse office overlooking the skyline. He swirled amber whiskey in a crystal glass while Nicholas Kane handed him the latest surveillance photographs. Daniel smiled as he studied Emma's exhausted face. "She still wears that apron." Nicholas nodded. "Every day." Daniel laughed quietly. "She never learns." He tossed the photograph onto the desk. "I offered her a better life once." Nicholas said nothing. Daniel walked toward the window. "You know what her biggest weakness has always been?" "What?" "Hope." He took another sip. "No matter how many times life knocks her down, she gets back up." He smiled. "I've always hated that." His phone vibrated. A secure message flashed across the screen. "The bakery has no power." Daniel typed back immediately. "Good." Another message appeared. "What's next?" Daniel looked at Emma's photograph one last time. His smile slowly disappeared. "Now," he murmured, "we take away the only thing she has left." He sent the reply. "Burn her future." That evening, Luca's phone rang only once. He answered immediately. His security chief spoke without greeting. "Boss, what is it?" "We intercepted communications." Luca's eyes narrowed. "From Kane." "Yes." A brief silence. Then 4 words that instantly changed the room. "They're targeting the bakery." Luca stood. His chair slid backward across the marble floor. "When?" "We don't know." "Hours. Maybe tonight." Luca reached for his coat. Every man in the room stood with him. No orders were necessary. As Luca walked toward the elevator, he spoke only one sentence. His voice remained calm, almost quiet. Yet everyone who heard it understood exactly what it meant. "Bring Daniel Mercer to me, alive." The night settled over Maple Street beneath a curtain of steady rain. Most of the shops had gone dark hours earlier. The florist's windows reflected nothing but empty sidewalks. The cafe chairs had been stacked. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer beneath the heavy clouds. Only one faint light still glowed inside Hart's Bakery. A single battery-powered lantern rested on the counter. Emma couldn't sleep. Without electricity, tomorrow's dough had to be mixed entirely by hand. She stood beside the old brick oven, kneading flour and water with aching wrists. Each fold of the dough echoed through the silent bakery. Fold, turn, press. Again, again, again. She smiled to herself despite everything. "If you could see me now, Mom." A small laugh escaped her. "You'd probably tell me my dough is too dry." She reached for a little more water. Outside, a shadow slipped into the narrow alley behind the bakery. Then another. Dark clothing, gloves, faces hidden beneath rain-soaked hoods. One of them carried a red gasoline can. The other held a small backpack. Neither spoke. The rain muffled every sound. They moved with practiced precision toward the rear delivery entrance. Several blocks away, 3 black SUVs rolled silently through the city. Inside the lead vehicle, Luca sat in complete silence. His phone rested in one hand. A blue dot on the screen marked Emma's Bakery. Another dot moved behind it. His security chief looked over from the passenger seat. "Our surveillance team just lost visual." Luca's eyes never left the screen. "They cut the cameras." "Yes." A long pause. Then Luca quietly asked, "Distance?" 4 minutes. Luca looked through the rain-streaked windshield. Too far. Behind the bakery. The first man splashed gasoline across the wooden delivery door. The second removed a glass bottle from his backpack. A rag protruded from the neck. He soaked it, lit a lighter. For one brief second, orange flames danced beneath the falling rain. He threw. The bottle shattered. Glass exploded across the door. Fire rushed outward with terrifying speed. The old dry wood ignited instantly. Within seconds, flames climbed the back wall. Inside, Emma froze. She smelled it before she saw it. Smoke. Real smoke. Not from the oven. From behind her. She spun around. Orange light flickered beneath the kitchen door. "What?" The next heartbeat answered. Crack. Glass shattered somewhere in the back room. Fire burst through the doorway. Emma gasped. "No!" She grabbed the nearest bucket of water and threw it. Steam exploded upward. The flames barely noticed. Instead, they spread faster. The ancient wooden shelves caught first. Then the ceiling beams. Within moments, the bakery she'd spent her entire life protecting had become an inferno. Emma reached for the fire extinguisher mounted beside the pantry. Empty. Someone had already discharged it. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident. She pulled out her phone. No signal. The thick smoke was already filling the kitchen. She coughed violently, then remembered something. The recipe notebook. Her mother's notebook. Handwritten. Stained with flour. filled with 3 generations of family recipes. It wasn't in the front shop. It was upstairs. Emma stared toward the narrow staircase. Black smoke rolled down from above. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she covered her mouth with her apron and charged upward. "Please," she whispered between coughs. "Please, still be there." The second floor was already disappearing beneath smoke. She stumbled into the tiny office. Desk, chair, bookshelf, cabinet. Nothing. Then she saw it. The faded blue notebook resting on the windowsill. Relief flooded her chest. She grabbed it. At that exact moment, the ceiling groaned. A burning beam crashed across the doorway. The exit vanished behind flames. Emma stood frozen. The fire surrounded her. Heat pressed against her skin from every direction. She looked around desperately. The window, too high. The hallway, blocked. Smoke burned her lungs. She coughed harder. Her knees weakened. "I'm sorry, Mom." Tears mixed with soot on her cheeks. "I tried." Below, neighbors had begun gathering outside. Someone screamed. "Call the fire department," another shouted. "Someone's inside." Panic spread across Maple Street. The black SUVs arrived before the fire engines. Brakes screamed. Doors flew open. Moretti security poured into the street. Luca stepped out. One look at the flames told him everything. His lieutenant ran toward him. "The building's unstable." Luca ignored him. "Witnesses say she's still inside." The lieutenant grabbed his arm. "Boss, you can't." Luca removed the man's hand without a word. His gray eyes fixed on the burning second-floor window. Through the smoke, he saw a silhouette. Emma, still alive. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward the burning entrance. "Boss!" Several men moved to stop him. He kept walking. A support beam crashed through the front display window, showering sparks across the sidewalk. Luca never slowed. One bodyguard ripped off his own heavy coat and threw it over Luca's shoulders. Another handed him a breathing mask. Luca accepted neither. He simply pushed open what remained of the front door. The flames swallowed him whole. Inside, heat wrapped around him like a living thing. The bakery no longer resembled the warm little shop he had visited. Shelves collapsed. Glass burst. Smoke rolled across the ceiling. Luca moved quickly, not recklessly, purposefully. He knew buildings. He knew fire. He climbed the narrow staircase 2 steps at a time. Halfway up, another beam crashed behind him. His escape route disappeared. He didn't look back. Upstairs, Emma's vision blurred. She clutched the recipe notebook against her chest. The smoke had become almost impossible to breathe. Then, through the roar of the fire, she heard footsteps. Impossible. Heavy. Steady. Someone was climbing toward her. A familiar voice cut through the smoke. "Emma." She blinked. No, she was imagining things. Again. "Emma." Closer this time. She turned. A tall figure emerged through the smoke and flames. Black coat already burning at one sleeve. Gray eyes unwavering. "Luca." She stared at him in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes dropped to the notebook clutched in her arms. Even now, she had chosen to save it instead of herself. Without a word, he stepped forward. A burning beam suddenly fell between them. Luca caught it with both hands before it struck her. The impact drove him to one knee. His sleeve ignited completely. Emma gasped. "Luca!" He shoved the burning timber aside with a violent heave. The path cleared. Only then did he speak. "Come!" She looked at the notebook, then at him. "The recipes. I know. They're all I have left." He looked directly into her eyes. "No." His voice remained calm despite the inferno surrounding them. "You." For one brief second, Emma forgot the fire, forgot the smoke. forgot everything except the certainty in his voice. He took the notebook from her hands, tucked it safely beneath his coat, then reached for her. Not demanding, simply offering. Emma placed her trembling hand in his. Together, they turned toward the burning staircase, just as the entire ceiling above them began to collapse. The ceiling came down with a deafening roar. Luca reacted before Emma even understood what was happening. He pulled her hard against him. A burning section of timber slammed onto the floor, only inches behind them, sending sparks exploding through the smoke. The impact shook the entire second floor. Emma stumbled. Luca caught her before she fell. The recipe notebook remained tucked securely beneath his coat. Not a single page had slipped free. This way. His voice was low, steady. He scanned the room once, calculating. The staircase was gone, swallowed by flames. The hallway behind them had become a tunnel of fire. There was only one option left. The window. Emma followed his gaze. We're too high. Luca crossed the room in 3 long strides and shoved against the old wooden frame. It didn't move. Paint and years had sealed it shut. He struck it once with his shoulder. Nothing. Again. The frame cracked. On the third impact, the entire window burst outward. Cold rain rushed inside, carrying a wave of blessedly cool air. Emma gasped, coughing violently. Below them, people on the street shouted all at once. "They're at the window! I can see them!" "Get a ladder." The first fire engine skidded around the corner, sirens piercing the night. A firefighter jumped from the truck before it had fully stopped. Second floor. Another crew hurried to extend a rescue ladder. But the ancient building had already begun to lean. One firefighter looked up and shouted, "The wall won't hold much longer." Luca glanced over the edge. The ladder was still several feet away. Too far. Too slow. He looked back at Emma. "When I tell you." She immediately shook her head. "No. We jump." "No." Her voice trembled. "I'm not leaving you." Luca didn't argue. Instead, he wrapped the recipe notebook inside his coat and secured it tightly. Then he removed the heavy overcoat entirely and draped it around Emma's shoulders. "It'll protect you." "What about you?" He ignored the question. The floor beneath them groaned. A deep, ugly sound. Wood surrendering to fire. Luca looked once toward the collapsing hallway. Then back to Emma. His decision was already made. He stepped onto the windowsill, turned, and reached both hands toward her. "Trust me." Emma looked into his gray eyes. She had known this man for less than 2 days. Yet somehow, she trusted him more than the man she had once planned to marry. She took his hands. At that exact moment, the floor behind them disappeared. The room collapsed inward. Luca pulled Emma forward. Together, they leaped. The firefighters had managed to position the rescue ladder just enough to break their fall. Luca twisted in midair, shielding Emma with his own body. They slammed against the ladder. Firefighters caught Emma first. Another 2 grabbed Luca before both could fall to the pavement. The crowd erupted into relieved applause. Emma barely noticed. She was too busy coughing. Hands reached toward her from every direction. Paramedics, firefighters, neighbors. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Another checked her pulse. She pushed them gently aside. "Luca." Her voice was hoarse. "Where's Luca?" A firefighter pointed behind her. Emma turned. Luca had already climbed to his feet. His right forearm was badly burned. The sleeve of his shirt had been scorched away. Ash covered his face. Yet his first concern wasn't himself. He reached inside the coat, carefully removed the blue recipe notebook, walked toward Emma, and placed it into her hands. "It's safe." Emma stared at the notebook. Not a single page had burned. Tears finally overflowed. Not loud sobs. Not dramatic cries. Just quiet tears slipping down smoke-covered cheeks. She clutched the notebook tightly against her chest. "My mother's handwriting." Her voice broke. I thought I'd lost it. Luca simply nodded. Around them, firefighters continued battling the blaze. The roof finally gave way with a thunderous crash. Flames shot high into the night sky. Everyone watched in silence, as Hart's Bakery, the place where Emma had grown up, the place where her mother had laughed, the place that had carried 3 generations of memories, collapsed into fire. Emma stood motionless. She didn't cry for the walls, or the ovens, or the shattered windows. She cried for mornings that would never return, for conversations that only those old wooden floors had heard, for the smell of bread rising before sunrise, for every memory now buried beneath smoke and ash. Without thinking, she leaned forward. Her forehead rested gently against Luca's shoulder. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Luca remained perfectly still. He didn't wrap his arms around her. He didn't offer empty reassurance. He simply stayed. Sometimes, presence was stronger than words. Across the street, Victor Romano watched from inside a black sedan. He had insisted on coming despite everyone's objections. His weathered eyes remained fixed on Emma. He spoke quietly to the driver. "She's grieving a home." The driver nodded. "Yes, sir." Victor sighed. "No." His gaze never left Emma. "She isn't grieving a building. She's grieving the life that disappeared inside it." The driver fell silent. Victor understood that kind of loss better than anyone. Several yards away, detectives began questioning witnesses. One firefighter approached the lead investigator. "The fire didn't start naturally." The detective frowned. "What makes you think that?" "We found traces of accelerant." Another firefighter carried over a melted red gasoline container recovered behind the bakery. The detective's expression darkened. "Arson." The word spread quickly through the crowd. Emma heard it. She slowly lifted her head. "Someone." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Did this?" The detective nodded. "We believe so." Emma looked back at the burning ruins. Someone hadn't merely destroyed a business. Someone had chosen to erase her life. At that same moment, nearly 15 miles away, Daniel Mercer watched live news coverage from the comfort of his penthouse. The television showed firefighters surrounding the burning bakery. Smoke climbed into the night sky. Daniel smiled faintly. Nicholas Kane stood nearby. "The building's gone." Daniel nodded. "And the woman?" "She survived." For the first time, Daniel's smile faded. "How?" "Moretti." Daniel set his whiskey glass down. Slowly. "So, he went himself." Nicholas nodded. "He entered the fire." Daniel looked back toward the television. "Interesting." "Very interesting." He walked toward the window overlooking the city lights. "I underestimated him." "And her." Nicholas waited. Daniel smiled again. Not kindly. "If she's important enough for Luca Moretti to risk his life." He turned around. "Then she's valuable enough to become his greatest weakness." The next morning, sunlight revealed what the fire had hidden. Charred beams, blackened bricks, collapsed roofing. Everything smelled of wet ash. Yellow caution tape surrounded the remains of the bakery. Emma stood silently outside the ruins. A paper coffee cup warmed her hands. She hadn't slept. Neither had Luca. Construction inspectors moved carefully through the wreckage. One of them approached. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart." He removed his hard hat respectfully. "The structure isn't salvageable." She nodded once. "I figured. It'll have to be demolished." Emma looked at the place where the old brick oven had stood. Only a broken section of chimney remained. For the first time in years, she had nowhere to bake. Mrs. Evelyn appeared carrying 2 grocery bags. Then came the florist, the cafe owner, the mailman. One by one, people from Maple Street gathered around Emma. Nobody made speeches. Nobody offered pity. Instead, Mrs. Evelyn handed Emma a bag filled with fresh ingredients. "My grandson bought flour." The florist smiled. I brought sugar. The cafe owner lifted a set of spare coffee machines. Borrow these. Another neighbor spoke up. My cousin owns an empty commercial kitchen. You can use it. Then another voice. I know someone with bakery ovens. And I have delivery vans. We'll help. Emma looked around in stunned silence. More neighbors kept arriving. Some carried mixing bowls. Others carried butter, eggs, aprons, even handwritten recipes copied from pastries they'd bought over the years. Emma covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to thank all of you. Mrs. Evelyn smiled. You already did. Emma frowned. When? The elderly woman chuckled. Every morning. She looked toward the burned bakery. You fed this neighborhood for years. She reached over and gently squeezed Emma's hand. It's our turn. Emma's tears returned. But this time, they weren't born from loss. They came from something stronger. Hope. Across the street, Luca watched the gathering from beside one of the black SUVs. His lieutenant stepped beside him. Boss. Luca kept his eyes on Emma. She's not alone anymore. The lieutenant followed his gaze as neighbors surrounded her with quiet determination. For the first time since the fire, the corner of Luca's mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. Then his phone vibrated. He looked down. A single message had arrived from an encrypted number. If you protect the baker, the next coffin will be hers. The faint trace of warmth disappeared from Luca's face. His gray eyes became cold again, very cold. Without another word, he handed the phone to his lieutenant. Find him. The lieutenant read the message. Alive? Luca's gaze settled once more on Emma. This time, there was no hesitation. No. The single word hung in the morning air, because whoever had just threatened Emma had unknowingly crossed the one line Luca Moretti would never forgive. The message remained on the phone screen for several long seconds. If you protect the baker, the next coffin will be hers. Luca read it once. Then again. His face revealed nothing. Only the men who had stood beside him for years recognized the dangerous stillness that settled over him. One lieutenant quietly asked, Should we trace the sender? Luca handed the phone back. They want us to. They used a disposable relay. They expect us to waste time. The lieutenant nodded. So what do we do? Luca looked across the street. Emma was thanking another neighbor who had brought sacks of flour. Despite everything she had lost, she was smiling. Small, tired, but real. Only then did Luca answer. We don't chase messages. We hunt people. The lieutenant understood immediately. Within seconds, orders spread through encrypted radios. Unmarked vehicles rolled away from the ruins of Hart's Bakery. The hunt had begun. Emma spent the rest of the morning helping neighbors sort through the few things recovered from the wreckage. Most were unusable. Burned pans, melted trays, broken cups. Near the edge of the collapsed kitchen, one firefighter carefully handed her a small metal cookie cutter shaped like a star. It's all we found that wasn't damaged. Emma smiled sadly. My mother used this every Christmas. She slipped it carefully into her pocket. Some memories survived in unexpected ways. Around noon, Sophie pulled up in her aging pickup truck. I found you a kitchen. Emma looked up. You did? My cousin owns a small catering company. They only use the building at night. You can bake during the day. Emma blinked. Really? Sophie grinned. Come on. They're waiting. The temporary kitchen was nothing like Hart's Bakery. The walls were plain white. The ovens were modern stainless steel. The counters were spotless. Everything worked perfectly. And somehow, it felt completely lifeless. Emma rested her hand on one of the industrial mixers. It doesn't smell right. Sophie laughed. It smells clean. It smells empty. She looked around. My bakery smelled like butter before sunrise, and cinnamon by noon. This place smells like disinfectant. She took a deep breath. then untied the ribbon, holding her mother's recipe notebook closed. The familiar handwriting greeted her. Flour stains still covered several pages. One corner remained slightly singed from the fire. Emma smiled. "Okay, Mom," she whispered. "Let's start over." Hours passed. Flour dust floated through the sunlight. Butter melted. Dough rose. For the first time since the fire, Emma baked, not because she had customers, because she needed to remember who she was. The first loaf emerged from the oven just after 3. She closed her eyes and inhaled. There it was. Home. Not the building. The smell. The memory. The promise. Someone applauded quietly behind her. Emma turned. Victor stood near the doorway, leaning lightly on his cane. Luca remained a few steps behind him. Neither had announced themselves. Victor smiled warmly. "I knew you'd find another oven." Emma laughed softly. "I almost didn't." Victor looked around the kitchen. "It's smaller. But your bread smells exactly the same." Emma cut the warm loaf into thick slices. Without thinking, she handed the first piece to Victor. He accepted it, with the same grateful smile he had worn that rainy afternoon in the bakery. Luca watched silently. Victor took a bite, closed his eyes, then nodded once. Still perfect. Emma looked at Luca. "What about you?" He remained still. "I've never actually seen you eat." Victor chuckled. "My son rarely slows down long enough." Emma picked up another slice. "Then today's the day." She held it toward Luca. He looked at the bread, then at Emma. For a moment, neither moved. Finally, he accepted it. The bodyguards near the entrance exchanged subtle glances. Some had worked beside Luca for over a decade. None could remember the last time anyone had casually handed him food. Luca took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed. Emma waited. "Well?" He looked at the slice in his hand, then back at her. One corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. It needed another minute. Emma stared, then burst into laughter. "So you do criticize?" Victor laughed harder. "I was wondering when you'd discover that." Luca calmly took another bite. "But it's very good." Emma shook her head. That wasn't so difficult. For the first time, the kitchen felt alive. Across the city, Daniel Mercer watched surveillance footage on a large monitor. The screen showed Emma laughing, Luca standing nearby, Victor eating fresh bread. Daniel slowly leaned back in his chair. They recovered faster than expected. Nicholas Kane folded his arms, the neighborhood supporting her. Daniel nodded. "I expected that." What I didn't expect, he paused the footage on Luca, was him. Nicholas frowned. "What now?" Daniel smiled. "If protecting her makes him predictable." He tapped the screen. "Then we make protecting her impossible." That evening, Emma insisted on walking home alone. Luca's security team quietly objected. She refused. "I appreciate everything." She smiled politely. "But I don't need bodyguards to buy groceries." One guard tried again. "Miss Hart." "I'm fine." She waved goodbye and disappeared around the corner, carrying a paper bag filled with vegetables and flour. The guards exchanged uneasy looks. One immediately called Luca. "Boss?" She left alone. A brief silence. "Keep your distance." Luca replied, "Don't let her see you." Emma walked through the neighborhood, enjoying the cool evening air. For the first time in days, she felt almost peaceful. Children played basketball in a nearby park. Someone grilled food in a backyard. A radio played old jazz from an apartment window. Life continued. Maybe, so could she. She turned into a quieter side street. The sounds behind her slowly disappeared. Then, a white delivery van rolled around the corner. It stopped directly beside her. The sliding door flew open. 2 masked men jumped out. Emma barely had time to react. One lunged toward her. Instinct took over. She swung the heavy grocery bag with all her strength. A bag of flour exploded across the attacker's face. He stumbled backward, blinded. The second man grabbed her arm. Emma reached into the grocery bag. Her fingers closed around the long metal rolling pin she'd borrowed from the kitchen. She swung. The rolling pin struck his forearm with a loud crack. He cried out in pain. Emma tore free and ran. The attackers chased her. She sprinted toward the park. Her lungs burned. Footsteps thundered behind her. One man grabbed her apron. It ripped free in his hands. Emma spotted a public playground ahead, a metal swing set, a sandbox. Most importantly, construction tools left beside a maintenance shed. She snatched up a bag of bread flour, spun, and hurled it directly into the face of the nearest attacker. Another white cloud erupted. The man cursed, rubbing his eyes. Emma didn't stop. She grabbed a pastry scraper from her supply bag. Not as a weapon. As a distraction. She flung it across the pavement. It clattered loudly. Both attackers instinctively looked toward the sound. That single second was enough. Emma ducked behind the playground equipment. Disappeared between climbing frames. Tires screeched. 3 black SUVs burst into the park from opposite directions. Doors opened before the vehicles stopped moving. Moretti security flooded the area. The attackers immediately turned to flee. Too late. Within seconds, both men were tackled to the ground. Emma stood behind the swings, breathing hard. Her hands shook. Her heart pounded. She slowly looked up. Luca walked toward her through the park. Not running. Walking. His gray eyes quickly scanned her for injuries. "You hurt?" Emma blinked. "No." "You?" She looked confused. "I wasn't the one attacked." Luca noticed the flour covering one unconscious attacker, the broken rolling pin lying nearby, the pastry scraper, the torn apron. Then he looked back at Emma. "You fought." Emma nodded. "I bake." She shrugged weakly. "I used what I had." For the first time since meeting her, Luca looked genuinely surprised. Not because she had survived, because she had refused to surrender. Victor's words echoed quietly in his mind. Strength doesn't always carry a gun. Luca looked at the unconscious kidnappers, then back at Emma. A faint smile almost appeared. Almost. "You remind me," he said quietly, "of someone who refuses to stay down." Before Emma could ask what he meant, one of Luca's bodyguards ran toward them, his face suddenly drained of color. "Boss." He held up a phone recovered from one of the attackers. They weren't trying to kill her. Luca's expression sharpened. What were they trying to do? The guard swallowed. "The message says..." He looked at Emma, then back at Luca. They were supposed to bring her in alive. A heavy silence settled over the park. Because kidnapping Emma had never been the real objective. She was bait. And somewhere nearby, someone else was already waiting for Luca to take it. The park fell unnaturally quiet. Even the children who had been playing basketball moments earlier had been hurried home by frightened parents. Only the flashing blue lights of arriving police cars disturbed the darkness. Emma looked from the unconscious kidnappers to Luca. "They wanted me alive?" Luca didn't answer immediately. His attention remained fixed on the phone in the bodyguard's hand. "Show me." The guard unlocked the device using the unconscious attacker's fingerprint. A single encrypted message filled the screen. "Secure the woman. Hold until the wolf arrives." Nothing more. No signature. No location. No instructions beyond that. Luca read it twice, then handed the phone back. They never intended to escape. His lieutenant frowned. It was a trap. Yes, they expected us. Emma felt a chill run through her. "They wanted you to come because of me." Luca finally looked at her. His expression remained calm. "They underestimated you." Emma gave a tired laugh. "I don't think hitting someone with a rolling pin counts as impressive." One of the bodyguards couldn't help smiling. Another quietly muttered, "I wouldn't volunteer to be hit." Emma almost smiled. Almost. Then she noticed Luca wasn't amused. His eyes had already moved beyond the park, scanning rooftops, windows, dark intersections. He was looking for the people who had never intended to show themselves. "Move!" His voice was quiet. Every Moretti guard reacted instantly. 2 shielded Emma. Others secured the prisoners. The remaining men spread through the surrounding streets. Luca walked beside Emma. "You'll stay with us tonight." She shook her head. "I don't want to keep depending on you." "This isn't dependence. It feels like it." "It isn't." She stopped walking. "Luca." He turned. "My problems became yours because I gave your father bread." He remained silent. "I don't want innocent people getting hurt because of me." Luca studied her for several long seconds, then answered with complete certainty. "They were already hunting you." Emma frowned. "What?" "Before my father ever entered your bakery." The realization slowly settled across her face. "This," she whispered, "was never about the bread. No, it's about someone who wants leverage." She looked away. "I don't understand any of this." "I know." His answer was unexpectedly gentle. "And I intend to keep it that way." Across the city, Daniel Mercer watched the failed kidnapping unfold through a live drone feed. The tiny aircraft circled high above the park before quietly disappearing into the night. Nicholas Kane folded his arms. "We lost both teams." Daniel switched off the monitor. They served their purpose. They were captured. They distracted him. Nicholas hesitated. "From what?" Daniel smiled. "Exactly." He picked up another phone. A different encrypted channel. A different operation. Already underway. At Moretti Manor, Victor Romano sat beside a fireplace reading an old leather-bound novel. The mansion was unusually peaceful. A servant quietly poured tea. Victor thanked him with a smile. "You've known Mr. Luca since he was a boy." The elderly servant nodded. "Yes, sir." Victor looked thoughtfully into the fire. "When he was 12, he found an injured bird." The servant smiled. "I remember. He carried it everywhere." Victor chuckled softly. "He refused to let anyone else care for it." The servant looked toward the window. "I think he's doing the same thing again." Victor closed the book. "No." He smiled warmly. "This time, the bird has claws." The peace shattered. A deafening explosion rocked the eastern wing of the estate. Glass burst inward. Fire alarms screamed. Servants shouted. Victor slowly rose to his feet. What happened? Before anyone could answer, automatic gunfire erupted outside. Luca's convoy had just reached the halfway point to the estate when every phone inside the SUVs rang simultaneously. His security chief answered first. The color drained from his face. "Boss?" Luca looked over. "What?" "The manor is under attack." Every vehicle accelerated at once. Tires screamed across wet pavement. Emma gripped the seat. What happened? No one answered. She didn't need them to. She could hear it through the phone. Gunfire. Explosions. People shouting. Luca's expression never changed. Only one thing did. His voice. His voice. Faster. The lead driver pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Moretti estate had become a battlefield. Black-clad attackers poured through the damaged eastern gardens. Security teams returned fire from stone walls and balconies. Smoke drifted across the courtyard. Victor stood calmly inside the main hall, while guards urged him toward the underground bunker. "This way, sir." He shook his head. "Everyone else first." "Sir." "The staff. They go first." The guards didn't argue. They already knew he would never change his mind. One young maid froze in terror halfway across the marble entrance hall. Bullets shattered the windows above her. She couldn't move. Victor quietly walked back, took her trembling hand. "It's all right. We'll walk together." She looked at him through frightened tears. What if they come inside? Victor smiled gently. Then we'll keep walking. The convoy burst through the estate gates. Before the vehicles had fully stopped, Luca was already out. Gunfire echoed across the grounds. One attacker appeared from behind a fountain. Luca disarmed him with 2 swift movements. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Another charged from the gardens. A bodyguard intercepted him. Luca kept moving. His destination wasn't the attackers. It was the mansion. Emma watched from inside the SUV. She had never seen anything like it. No shouting. No reckless rage. Only absolute focus. One lieutenant opened her door. "You stay here." Emma nodded automatically. Then she looked toward the manor. Smoke poured from broken windows. Servants were helping injured people outside. One elderly gardener collapsed near the front steps. Nobody noticed. Everyone else was too busy. Emma did. Without thinking, she ran. "Miss Hart!" the lieutenant shouted after her. Too late. Emma reached the gardener first. Blood soaked his shoulder. "It's okay." She knelt beside him. "I've got you." She tore a strip from her already damaged apron, pressed it firmly against the wound. The old man groaned. "It hurts." "I know. Stay with me." 2 frightened kitchen workers hurried over. Emma pointed toward the medical tent. "Help me carry him." They obeyed immediately. Nearby, Luca had just reached the entrance when he glanced back. He saw Emma, not hiding, not panicking, helping someone she'd never met. For one brief second, everything else disappeared. Victor had been right. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was courage. The attack ended almost as quickly as it had begun. The surviving gunmen fled into the surrounding forest. Moretti security secured the estate. Ambulances arrived. Firefighters extinguished the remaining fires. The marble courtyard became filled with exhausted silence. Emma finally sat down on the stone steps. Her hands were stained with blood that wasn't hers. She stared at them, quietly. Luca approached. He handed her a clean handkerchief. Without a word, she accepted it. "Thank you." He nodded once. Neither spoke. Sometimes silence carried more understanding than conversation ever could. Then, a scream echoed from inside the mansion. "Mr. Romano." Both Emma and Luca turned instantly. Victor had collapsed. Doctors rushed toward him. His cane rolled across the polished floor. Luca reached his father in seconds. Victor struggled to breathe. One hand clutched his chest. The physician looked up, his expression grim. "We need the ambulance. Now." Emma stood frozen. The old man who had smiled over a loaf of bread, who had walked through her tiny bakery with quiet wonder, now lay pale and motionless beneath the grand chandelier. Victor slowly opened his eyes. He searched the room. Not for Luca, for Emma. She stepped closer. He managed the faintest smile, then whispered words only she could hear. "Keep." He struggled for breath. "Baking." His hand slipped from hers. The medical team immediately surrounded him. Luca stood perfectly still, watching, waiting, not saying a single word, because for the first time in many years, there was absolutely nothing he could control. And as the ambulance doors slammed shut behind Victor Romano, Emma realized the battle they had survived tonight had only been the beginning. The ambulance disappeared into the rain, with its sirens cutting through the night. No one spoke as the convoy followed. Not inside Luca's SUV, not over the encrypted radios, not even among the bodyguards who normally exchanged quiet status reports every few minutes. Silence settled over everyone like another layer of rain. Emma sat with Victor's cane resting across her knees. One of the servants had quietly placed it in her hands before leaving the estate. "He'll want it back," the old servant had said. Emma hoped he was right. The emergency department was already waiting when the convoy reached St. Gabriel Medical Center. Doctors rushed Victor through the automatic doors. The medical staff moved with calm efficiency. The Moretti security team remained outside. No shouting, no interference, only anxious waiting. Luca stood alone near the entrance, rainwater dripping from his black coat. His burned forearm had been bandaged hastily, but he seemed completely unaware of it. Emma approached slowly. "They'll do everything they can." He nodded once. "I know." His eyes never left the hospital doors. She hesitated, then quietly asked, "Has he been sick for a long time?" Luca answered after several seconds. Longer than he admitted. He didn't want anyone worrying. Emma smiled sadly. "That sounds like him." Luca looked at her for the first time that evening. "He liked you." Emma lowered her eyes. "I liked him too. He rarely trusted people." "I don't know why he trusted me." Luca's voice became almost thoughtful. "You fed him before you knew his name. Most people wait until after." Hours passed. Coffee grew cold. Rain finally stopped. The hospital corridors became quieter as midnight slipped toward dawn. A doctor eventually emerged. His face revealed everything before he spoke.
"He survived the attack."
Emma exhaled with relief. "But," the doctor continued carefully, "his heart is failing." The relief vanished. "We've stabilized him. For now." He asked to see two people. The doctor looked toward them. "Mr. Moretti?" Then toward Emma and Miss Hart. Victor's hospital room overlooked the sleeping city. Machines beeped softly beside the bed. Moonlight filtered through half-closed blinds. Victor looked smaller somehow. Not weaker, just older. The years he had hidden behind quiet smiles now showed themselves openly. He smiled when they entered. "There you are." Emma walked to his bedside. "How are you feeling?" Victor chuckled. "I've certainly had better evenings." Even now, he found room for humor. Luca remained standing near the window, hands in his coat pockets, saying nothing. Victor noticed immediately. "Come here." Luca obeyed, like a son, not a boss. Victor looked between them. "I owe both of you an apology." Emma frowned. "For what?" "I brought trouble into your life." She shook her head immediately. "No. You reminded me there are still good people." Victor smiled faintly. "That kindness has a price." Emma answered softly. "So does fear." The old man laughed quietly. "I suppose it does." His breathing became heavier. The monitor beside him beeped a little faster. The doctor had warned them not to tire him. Victor ignored that completely. "There are things," he paused to catch his breath, "that cannot wait." He reached beneath the blanket with trembling fingers. The nurse helped him lift a small, worn leather envelope from the bedside drawer. Victor handed it to Emma. She looked confused. "What is this?" "Open it later." "I can't." "You can." His smile remained gentle. "It's not money." Emma accepted it reluctantly. Victor then turned toward Luca. His expression changed. Not colder. More serious. "You've spent your whole life protecting this family." Luca remained silent. "You've done it well." Another pause. "But somewhere along the way," Victor smiled sadly, "you forgot what we were protecting." The words hung in the quiet room. Luca lowered his eyes. Victor continued. "Power isn't the inheritance I wanted to leave you. It's responsibility. You taught me that." "I tried." Victor coughed hard. Emma instinctively reached for a glass of water. He took a small sip. "Thank you." Then he looked directly at Emma again. "When I walked into your bakery, I wasn't searching for bread." Emma listened quietly. "I was searching for proof." "Proof of what?" "That kindness still existed." His eyes shimmered. "You gave me that proof." Emma felt tears gathering again. "I only did what anyone should do." Victor smiled. "No. You did what very few actually would." The room grew quiet. Only the steady rhythm of the heart monitor remained. Victor reached out slowly. Emma took his hand. It felt noticeably colder than before. "I have one favor to ask." "Anything." He looked toward Luca, then back at Emma. "If I'm no longer here." Emma immediately shook her head. "Please don't say that." Victor smiled. "Listen, anyway." She nodded through tears. "Don't let kindness disappear from this family." Emma blinked. Victor squeezed her hand gently. "Luca carries burdens no one should carry alone. He'll never ask for help. He'll never admit he's tired." His eyes moved to his son. "So you'll have to notice." Luca finally spoke. "That's enough." His voice was quiet, almost pleading. Victor smiled. "No, it isn't." He looked at his son with all the affection of a father who understood time was running short. "She already saved us." Luca's jaw tightened. For the first time since Emma had met him, she saw grief behind the composure. Raw, unhidden. The monitor suddenly changed rhythm. Doctors entered quickly. "Mr. Romano, you need to rest." Victor nodded politely. "1 minute." The doctor reluctantly stepped back. Victor looked at Emma one final time. "Keep baking." Then at Luca. "Keep living." His breathing slowed. His fingers gradually relaxed. The monitor's steady beeping became irregular. The doctor stepped forward again. Victor closed his eyes peacefully. A faint smile remained on his face, as though he had fallen asleep remembering the smell of fresh bread. The monitor released one long, continuous tone. Emma covered her mouth. Tears flowed silently down her face. The doctor checked once more, then quietly looked at Luca. "I'm sorry." Time seemed to stop. No one moved. No one spoke. Luca stood beside the bed, looking at his father's peaceful face. Several doctors quietly left the room. The nurse dimmed the lights before slipping out. Only Emma remained. Luca slowly reached forward. He gently pulled the blanket a little higher over Victor's shoulders. A simple gesture. One a son performs without thinking. Then, he knelt beside the bed, not dramatically, not because anyone was watching, because he had no strength left to remain standing. Emma had never seen someone grieve so silently. No tears, no shouting, only unbearable stillness. She walked beside him, without speaking, without offering empty comfort. She simply rested one hand lightly on his shoulder. Luca closed his eyes for a brief moment. He didn't move away. That alone told Emma how much pain he carried. Dawn slowly painted the hospital windows with pale gold. Outside, the city awakened. Inside room 417, everything had changed. Emma finally remembered the leather envelope Victor had given her. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a single folded letter and an old photograph. The photograph showed a much younger Victor standing in front of a tiny bakery with his late wife. Written on the back, in faded ink, were 7 simple words. "Never let good people stand alone." Emma stared at the message, then looked at Luca. He was still kneeling beside his father. She folded the photograph carefully, held it close to her heart, and silently made a promise. She would honor Victor Romano's final wish, no matter what it cost. Outside the hospital, hidden inside a parked sedan across the street, Daniel Mercer lowered a pair of binoculars. He smiled faintly as hospital staff quietly drew the curtains in Victor's room. "So," he whispered, "the old lion is finally gone." Nicholas Kane looked toward him. "What's next?" Daniel started the engine. His smile widened. "Now," he shifted the car into gear, "we take everything his son has left." 3 days after Victor Romano's funeral, the city looked ordinary again. Traffic flowed. Restaurants filled. People hurried to work with coffee in hand. Life continued with remarkable indifference. Only those who had stood beneath the gray skies at the cemetery understood that something important had disappeared. Emma still carried Victor's letter in her apron pocket. She read the 7 words every morning before she began baking. Never let good people stand alone. The paper had already begun to soften from being unfolded so often. The temporary kitchen buzzed with quiet activity. Neighbors had volunteered in shifts. Mrs. Evelyn wrapped cookies. Sophie's cousin managed deliveries. 2 high school students washed mixing bowls after classes. No one asked for payment. They simply showed up. Emma looked around the room and smiled. Hart's bakery no longer had walls. But somehow, it had become larger than ever. Across the city, Luca stood in his father's office for the first time since the funeral. Nothing had been moved. Victor's reading glasses still rested beside an unfinished chess puzzle. A cup of tea sat untouched on the windowsill. The room smelled faintly of old books and cedar wood. Luca opened the top drawer of the massive oak desk. Inside lay a sealed envelope bearing only his name. He recognized his father's handwriting instantly. He broke the seal. The letter was short. "If you're reading this, then you're standing where I once stood. Don't mistake solitude for strength. The people willing to tell you the truth are worth more than those willing to obey." And if Emma Hart is still in your life, Luca paused. His father's words continued. Protect her if you must. But don't protect her so much that you steal her chance to stand beside you. Luca slowly folded the letter. For the first time in years, his father had given him an order he didn't immediately know how to follow. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer prepared for the final stage of his plan. He adjusted the cuffs of an expensive navy suit before stepping onto the stage of the city's annual Children's Hope Charity Gala. Television cameras lined the ballroom. Business leaders filled the tables. Politicians shook hands beneath crystal chandeliers. Daniel smiled warmly for every photograph. No one looking at him would have guessed he had ordered a bakery burned to the ground. Nicholas Kane approached quietly. "Everything's ready." Daniel nodded. "The guests? Almost all here. And Moretti? Expected within 20 minutes. Daniel smiled. "Perfect." On a nearby screen, technicians prepared a video presentation, supposedly celebrating charitable donations. Hidden among the files was fabricated evidence designed to portray Luca Moretti as the mastermind behind money laundering, extortion, and the recent violence in the city. Daniel intended to destroy Luca publicly. Not with bullets, with reputation. Emma had no intention of attending the gala, until Sophie burst into the kitchen holding an invitation. "You're going." Emma looked up from kneading dough. "I absolutely am not. You were invited personally." "By whom?" Sophie handed her the envelope. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "My father believed kindness belongs in every room. Please come. Luca." Emma stared at the note for a long moment, then quietly untied her apron. The ballroom glittered beneath hundreds of crystal lights. Emma felt completely out of place in her simple dark blue dress. People glanced toward her. Some recognized the baker whose shop had burned. Others whispered after noticing Luca walking across the room toward her. He stopped beside her. "You came." She smiled. "You asked." His gaze briefly softened. "Thank you." Neither noticed Daniel watching from across the ballroom. He raised his champagne glass slightly. Right on time, the charity presentation began. A large screen descended behind the stage. The host smiled. "Tonight, we celebrate generosity." Applause filled the room. Then, the lights flickered. The scheduled presentation disappeared. Instead, documents appeared on the giant screen. Financial records, photographs, bank transfers. The audience gasped. The host stared in confusion. Daniel stepped forward dramatically. "It pains me deeply." He paused for effect. "To reveal that a man celebrated by many has secretly brought violence into our city." He turned toward Luca. Cameras followed. Microphones lifted. Whispers swept across the ballroom. Daniel smiled sadly. "I'm speaking, of course, about Luca Moretti." The room erupted. Journalists rushed closer. Camera flashes exploded. Emma looked toward Luca. He didn't move. Didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. He simply watched Daniel. Calmly. Almost patiently. Daniel continued. "I couldn't remain silent. He gestured toward the screen. The evidence speaks for itself. Another wave of whispers spread through the guests. Emma looked at the documents. Something felt wrong. Several dates. Several signatures. They didn't match. Before she could speak, another voice interrupted. Actually, the ballroom fell silent. Everyone turned. An elderly man in a wheelchair rolled slowly toward the stage. Behind him walked two federal investigators carrying sealed evidence boxes. Daniel's confident smile faltered. The elderly man adjusted his glasses. "My name is Arthur Bennett." He looked directly at Daniel. "I was your accountant." Daniel's face lost all color. Arthur continued calmly. "For 11 years. I falsified financial records under your instructions." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. One investigator connected a secure drive to the presentation system. The giant screen changed instantly. This time, real bank transfers appeared. Hidden companies. Secret payments. Wire transfers leading directly to Daniel Mercer. Photographs followed. Daniel meeting Nicholas Kane. Daniel paying the arson team. Daniel ordering surveillance of Emma months before Victor entered the bakery. Every lie collapsed in front of the city. Emma covered her mouth in shock. The ballroom became completely silent. Arthur lowered his eyes. I remained silent because I was afraid. He looked toward Emma. Then I saw what happened to your bakery, and I realized fear had already cost too much. Federal agents stepped onto the stage. "Daniel Mercer, you're under arrest." Daniel backed away. "No, you don't understand." He looked desperately toward Nicholas. Nicholas had disappeared. Several of Daniel's business partners quietly stood and walked toward the exits. Not one remained beside him. The room that had applauded him minutes earlier now watched in silence. He turned. His eyes found Emma. For a brief second, the charming businessman vanished. Only bitterness remained. "You ruined everything." Emma slowly walked toward the stage. She stopped only a few feet away. Years earlier, she would have cried, begged, asked why. Now, she simply looked at him. "You spent years trying to convince me." Her voice remained calm. "That I wasn't enough." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You never were." The words hung in the air. Emma smiled sadly. "No." She shook her head. "I just wasn't enough." She paused. "For someone who could never appreciate kindness." Daniel stared at her. She continued. "I kept trying to become the person you wanted. Until I realized." She glanced toward Luca, then back. "The right people never asked me to change." Silence filled the ballroom. No applause. No dramatic speeches. Only truth. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. As federal agents escorted him away in handcuffs, he glanced once toward Luca. Their eyes met. Luca neither smiled nor celebrated. Justice didn't require satisfaction, only completion. Emma quietly returned to Luca's side. The gala resumed almost awkwardly. People began talking again. Music slowly returned. Life moved forward. Luca looked at Emma. "You could have humiliated him." She shook her head. "It wouldn't change the past." "No," he agreed softly. "It wouldn't." For several moments they stood together in comfortable silence. Then Sophie's excited voice suddenly echoed across the ballroom. "Emma!" She ran over holding her phone. "Look." Emma frowned. "What is it?" Sophie turned the screen toward both of them. Breaking news. Nicholas Kane escaped federal custody during transport. Below the headline, security footage showed one more shocking image. Just before disappearing, Nicholas had smiled into the prison camera, as though the game wasn't over yet. 6 months later, the scent of warm bread drifted down Maple Street long before sunrise. It curled through the crisp morning air, slipping beneath apartment windows and around the corner cafe, carrying with it a familiar promise: home. The new Hart's Bakery stood exactly where the old one had once welcomed generations of neighbors. Not larger, not grander, simply alive again. The city had offered Emma opportunities to expand. Restaurant groups wanted partnerships. Investors proposed luxury cafes across the state. One national chain had even offered to buy her recipes for a sum that would have changed her life forever. She had politely declined every offer. The rebuilt bakery still had wooden floors, still had mismatched chairs, still had the old brass bell above the front door. The only thing noticeably different was the line of customers already waiting outside before dawn. Emma unlocked the door. The familiar bell chimed. "Good morning." Mrs. Evelyn entered first, as she always did. "Morning, dear." "The usual." Emma laughed. "As if I'd ever forget. A cinnamon roll. 1 sourdough loaf, and exactly 2 butter cookies for Mrs. Evelyn's grandson. Some traditions deserve to survive. The bakery filled quickly. Construction workers, teachers, college students, parents carrying sleepy children. Laughter once again echoed between the walls. Flour dust floated through shafts of golden morning sunlight. The old star-shaped cookie cutter rested proudly beside the register, framed beneath glass. Below it, a small handwritten note read, "Some memories survive the fire." Emma smiled every time she looked at it. Not because it reminded her of what she had lost, because it reminded her of what remained. Near the back window, a familiar chair stood slightly apart from the others. Simple oak, smooth from decades of use. No customer ever sat there. Not because anyone had forbidden it, because everyone knew. That had been Victor Romano's chair. Each morning, before opening the bakery, Emma quietly placed 1 fresh cup of black coffee beside it. Steam rose gently for a few minutes before disappearing into the air. It had become another silent tradition. Late that morning, Sophie burst through the front door, carrying 3 newspapers. "You've done it!" Emma looked up from frosting pastries. "What now?" Sophie spread the papers across the counter. Every front page carried the same story. Hart's Bakery named the city's favorite local business. Emma laughed. "I think they exaggerated." Mrs. Evelyn overheard. "No," she smiled. "They underestimated." The customers applauded. Emma's cheeks turned pink. She had never grown comfortable with attention. Across the street, a black sedan sat quietly beneath an old maple tree. No flashing lights, no convoy, no bodyguards crowding the sidewalk. Only one vehicle. Inside, Luca watched through the bakery window. He had been there nearly 20 minutes. He hadn't gone inside. One of his security officers looked over. "Boss?" Luca continued watching Emma laugh with a little girl choosing cupcakes. "Yes?" "You've been coming every Thursday." "I know. You could simply walk in." Luca remained silent. The officer smiled faintly. "You face armed men without blinking." Another pause. "But one baker makes you hesitate." The faintest hint of amusement touched Luca's eyes. "Drive." The sedan started moving. It traveled exactly 20 feet, then stopped again. The officer sighed dramatically. "I'll wait." A moment later, the bakery bell chimed. Emma looked up. Luca stood in the doorway, wearing an ordinary charcoal coat instead of an expensive tailored suit. No entourage, no ceremony. Just one man. The customers greeted him politely now. Fear had gradually been replaced by familiarity. Children even waved. Luca gave a small nod in return. Emma smiled. "You finally came inside." "I was nearby." She raised an eyebrow. "For 20 minutes?" One corner of his mouth lifted. "Approximately." She laughed. "I baked something." "I assumed." She placed a warm apple turnover onto a small plate. "No criticism today." He accepted it. "I'll try." Luca took one bite. Chewed thoughtfully. Emma folded her arms. "Well?" He looked at the pastry, then at her. You added more cinnamon. I did. It was the right decision. Emma smiled triumphantly. I knew I'd eventually win. Mrs. Evelyn called from another table. He complimented your baking. The entire bakery laughed. Even Luca. Very quietly. But genuinely. The lunch rush eventually slowed. Customers drifted back to work. The bakery settled into peaceful afternoon silence. Emma walked outside, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. Luca followed. Together they crossed the sidewalk. Near the bakery entrance stood a small wooden shelf. Every morning, one fresh loaf rested there, completely free. A simple handwritten sign hung above it. If you're hungry, please take one. No questions asked. Emma carefully placed that day's loaf on the shelf. A few minutes later, a little boy wearing oversized clothes stopped in front of it. He looked around nervously. Emma smiled. It's for you. The boy hesitated. Really? She nodded. Really. He picked up the loaf with both hands as though it were treasure. Thank you. Then he ran down the street smiling. Luca watched quietly. After the boy disappeared, he asked, You've done that every day? Emma nodded. Since we reopened. Why? She looked toward the empty street where the child had vanished. Because someone once walked into my bakery hungry. Luca smiled softly. I remember. I hope another hungry person always finds bread. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across Maple Street. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. Emma and Luca remained beside the little bread shelf. Neither felt the need to hurry. Finally, a curious young girl walking home from school stopped beside them. She pointed toward the free loaf sign. Miss Emma? Yes? Why do you always leave bread outside? Emma looked at the shelf. Then toward Victor's empty chair visible through the bakery window. She smiled. Because one act of kindness, she paused, can change a life. The little girl thought about that for a moment. Then smiled back. I'm going to remember that. I hope you do. The girl skipped happily down the sidewalk. Emma turned toward Luca. Your father would have liked today. Luca looked through the bakery window. The sunlight rested gently on Victor's empty chair. Yes, he answered quietly. He would. For several peaceful moments they stood together without speaking. Neither noticed the golden light slowly fading into evening. Neither noticed Maple Street continuing around them. They simply enjoyed the rare gift of stillness. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, Emma locked the bakery for the night. The aroma of fresh bread still lingered in the air. She looked toward the small wooden shelf. The free loaf was gone. Someone had needed it. That was enough. She switched off the lights. Only one remained. A small lamp above Victor's chair. Warm. Gentle. Always left on until dawn. Emma smiled. Good night. The bell chimed softly as she closed the door. Across the street, Luca waited beside his car. She walked over. Neither said anything at first. Then Emma looked up at him. Thank you. He frowned slightly. For what? She smiled. For reminding me not to stop baking. Luca held her gaze. I was repeating someone wiser than me. Emma laughed. Maybe. She extended her hand. Instead of shaking it, Luca gently held it for a moment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Just enough to say what words could not. Then he let go. Emma walked home beneath the evening sky. Luca watched until she disappeared around the corner. Only then did he allow himself a small, genuine smile. Almost no one ever saw it. But this time, he didn't mind if someone did. Some stories end with revenge. Others end with victory. This one ended with something far rarer. A loaf of warm bread, an open door, and the quiet certainty that kindness, once freely given, never truly disappears.